Good evening, everyone. We thank you so much for joining us. I know you probably need a moment to process this film, but we are going to jump right into a Q&A with this amazing team. First, I'd like to introduce Sasha Joseph Neulinger, who is the director of Rewind, and you recognize him from being on screen. There's Tom Winston, who's our producer. And we have our editor, Avela Grenier. I just want to say that this is probably one of the most amazing and outstanding moments of my life, was getting to join this film and work with you three people. You're just amazing filmmakers. I can't even describe how, beyond just making a film together, getting to know you and the type of people y'all are and the talent that you have, it's been such a blessing to my life. And
you've been a blessing to ours.
Well, thank you, sir.
You're the queen pit bull of the production, sweet, loyal, and badass. So it's like,
well,
mutual admiration society.
trying to keep things moving and everything, but I want to pick up basically where this film leaves off, and I'm going to start with you, Sasha. You pick up from Pennsylvania, you move to Montana, you go to film school. You're 22 years old, and you suddenly decide that you're going to make a feature film, which in itself is a pretty major thing to do. But not only do you decide you're going to make a feature film, you decide to make it about the worst thing that's ever happened to you in your life. And so I'm sure people are going, what would make this young man decide to take something so personal and something he probably would want to forget and make a film about it?
Yeah, I mean, my 6 years in Montana before I decided to do this, that's the longest span of time in my life up until that point, where child sexual abuse wasn't the primary focus of my existence. And so there was a lot of healing that could happen in the mountains, hiking, fishing, throwing myself into school and academics. But even though I was getting an opportunity to figure out what brought me joy in life outside of being a survivor of abuse, there was still this hangover, is the way I could describe it. This voice inside of me that was a byproduct of my trauma. This self-deprecating voice that really would pull me out of my joy, and the more joy I would have, the louder that voice would get. And finally, it kind of culminated when I was interning for Tom at Grizzly Creek Films. I was working on a show about bats for Nat Geo. I know it's random, but like I was hearing that voice again, and it didn't ring true. It said if the team knew what you had been through from your childhood, they wouldn't want you in this office. It's negative stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I can either go through the rest of my life with this voice lingering, or I can pump the brakes and find out where that voice is coming from and take action. And I knew that this voice was coming from unresolved trauma from my childhood. And I didn't want to just be a survivor. I wanted to truly be able to move forward with my life. And I figured that I might find some answers to where that voice was coming from through the home video. And that journey became Rewind, and here we are.
So tell me, how did you, it's one thing that you decide to do this, right? But then you decided you would also have everybody else that had been through this trauma join you in this film. So how in the world did you get them to decide that they would also participate in this? How did you talk to your family?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about the subjective experience of being a part of Rewind and being able to direct it, is that my family trusted me, and it was through many deep, vulnerable conversations. But the crux, the boiling point to all these conversations that I had with my mom, my dad, my sister was, hey, look, there are still pieces from our past that we can't touch without being triggered, which means that trauma is preventing us from truly being able to move forward with our lives. And survival isn't enough for me, and I don't believe that it should be enough for any of us. Like I want us to be able to confront the unresolved issues and do it together as a choice, to do it together, so that as a team, as a family that truly wants to love each other and move forward, that we can do that as a choice. The thing that scares us the most, we'll confront together. And through that, maybe we'll be able to move forward, not only with our heads held high, but the opportunity to have relationships that aren't founded on the trauma, but maybe can actually start building on new, beautiful experiences. And, you know, it was a different conversation with each family member, but I got to say, like, you know, the first part was trusting me, but then, you know, Tom and Avela, you know, you guys could talk about, I mean, I think about, you know, all the different lunches that we would have with my family and dinners and FaceTimes. And I mean, they're just, you guys really, you jumped on board and said, look, we're with Sasha in this, like, we're not, this isn't to exploit or to sensationalize, right? Like, we see you as human beings and we're just here to support that journey. I think that was huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sasha, I mean, I think one of the real key moments was when originally when I came on board, it was amazing that your mom and dad, and we had conversations before I even met them in person, said that, yes, we're on board with this. I mean, I wanted to make sure, obviously, becoming a part of it, that your family, it wasn't going to tear apart your family. And your sister respectfully, Becca respectfully said, I agree with what you're doing, Sasha, but I don't need myself to be on screen, and I don't need to go through that with the rest of the world. And it was because of our Kickstarter. And when she saw how many people around the world were moved by just the 5-minute Kickstarter video that was the beginning of our fundraising, that she changed her stance and said, yes, Sasha, not only do I support you, but I'll be a part of it. And as we look at the film now, that her participation, just, it's not the same film without it. There would have been a giant hole. And that was amazing that it was that process of fundraising for the film, which is kind of like a part of the world we live in now, that made the film that much better.
I think it was proof to her that exposing this secret wasn't going to bring shame to her, but actually incredible community support from strangers that she didn't even know. I mean, that's the thing, survivors, you know, there's such shame and stigma that works to keep these secrets held inside. And when you hold something that dark and painful, it can affect the way you see yourself and the way you perceive the world. The world becomes a scary place and you feel perhaps dirty and unlovable. And this idea of exposing this secret, I think she really felt vulnerable. And I remember when we were all sitting at the office, you know, Av and Tom, you guys were there, and some of the other team members, and, you know, we received the phone call together. I put her on speakerphone, you know, I mean, it was a checkpoint recognition that, yes, like, not only are we going to get the funds to start this thing, but the whole family's on board. And that was like just one full swoop of awesome momentum. And, you know.
Did they like the film once it's done? Because, you know, it's one thing to make a film. It's another thing that suddenly you see yourself on camera. What did they think?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely trepidation for me, concern, because I wanted to tell the story. I wanted to make sure that we made a film that told the story as authentically and accurately as possible. I know that, like, as a team, that's what we wanted. And Tom, you know, especially Avela too, in the edit, I mean, you know, not wanting to beat around the bush of these hard conversations and these hard moments, to not censor just because it might be hard for any one family member. And what I kept saying to members of my family was like, look, I promise you, I'm going to lead with vulnerability. And if there's a piece in there that makes you feel vulnerable, trust me, like, I'm going to be there too. Like, we're all in this together. But you know.
Were they happy with it though?
They were. That's the thing, is that it was relief, you know, and I checked one off at a time. So like first my mom watches it, she likes it. Whew, okay. But if she likes it, does that mean my dad will like it? I don't know. He watches it and he likes it. And then I'm like, all right, great. So they like it, but does that mean my sister will? And the feedback that I've gotten from each of them is that the film does our story justice, and it tells the truth, and it does so in a way that's honest, at times uncomfortable, of course, but ultimately they feel like they've been given a voice in the telling of this story that is true to them. And the fact that we were able to pull that off for my mom, my dad, and my sister, who all have very different subjective experiences within this narrative, I couldn't be happier. And that's honestly a testament to you know, a lot of different pieces, but also like Avela and the work she did in the edit.
So I'm going to move to Tom really quickly here. And Tom, you're surprising. When I first saw that you were on this film, and I was like, let me look this guy up. You're an Emmy award-winning director, producer, editor. You've done this amazing body of work, but it's all these natural, it's like more nature films, epic Yellowstone, and things that are of the quality of planet Earth. They call it blue chip nature films. So you have all the big boys calling you in to do these. You're the go-to guy for these major, beautiful, beautiful films. But you take on something that is so out of your wheelhouse to do Rewind. Now, what brought you to this project?
Yeah, it was not a place I expected to be. It really came about. Sasha and I met through film and some other film work that we had done for like a mentoring program in Montana. And then he came on as an intern, and everybody loves Sasha in the office as an intern. You can see he's very outgoing, fun to have around. And as he's leaving the internship, he kind of offhandedly said to me at some point, I think I'm ready to make my film about child sexual abuse. And I thought it was going to be Sasha's take on a really hard topic. I had no idea Sasha would be at the center of it. Just from what I knew of him, it just didn't seem like something that was part of his past. And then through other conversations Sasha had had with other team members, I found out it was his story. And I found out really the depth of the story, and that there was going to be this telling that included his father and all his father's films. So there's a real opportunity beyond just rehashing the story, but to really make it an experience through film. And I've always loved feature documentaries that really take you into different experiences, even though my kind of our business is natural history and kind of wildlife films. Those have often been the films I really love to watch, or ones more like Rewind. And I felt like we had the potential. I knew Sasha enough. We had trust. We could go out on this journey together. And my wife, Shasta, who's also a partner in my filmmaking, has also done some feature documentary work that has dealt with issues close to Rewind, like PTSD and Iraq and Afghanistan vets coming back and things like that. So I also knew I was going to have Shasta on our team, who really has directed and edited films like this. So it was still a giant leap of faith. And we all kind of went in it together. And it was really that Kickstarter. We said, okay, we'll put enough into this to make a Kickstarter video and see if there's something there. And it was, again, just like Becca's experience, all of us had the experience with seeing that the success of the Kickstarter video, that we could really make this something special. So of course, our goal for our Kickstarter funding didn't get us close to what we were going to need to make the film we wanted to make after that. But it kind of set us off on a journey where all of us knew we were not going to end until it was done, and done in a way that really honored the story.
Right, because this story took 7 years to tell. I came on 3 years ago, but y'all, when y'all were probably tired of it, it's like all new to me. And but that's a long time for any film. And sometimes with a documentary, it just takes that long. So So I'm going to our illustrious editor now, Miss Avela. You are really an astounding person because you actually, well, we premiered this film at Tribeca, and she won the Special Jury Recognition Award for telling this tale. Now, which in itself is an amazing thing to win something at Tribeca. But what is really amazing is that this was your first feature film, that you had also been doing more nature type films before this. And how did you get into this film? What brought you to it, and how did you approach it? When you see that there's 700 hours of footage, you know, it's daunting in itself. And so tell me what your journey was to get to this point.
Why would you sign up for 700 hours of footage? That's the question. I came to this story around the same time Tom did, because I was working at the company Grizzly Creek Films that Tom and I are both still at.
And Shasta is your sister, by the way. That's
Shasta is my sister.
Sister, so it's now all in the family. So
yep, yeah. Shasta was starting to work on some really amazing documentary films around Montana when I was in high school. So I'd been kind of used to her world there for a little bit. There's 8 years between us. And I fell into film after college on accident, kind of followed in her footsteps. And we were working together, and I met Sasha when he was interning. I was helping produce the Nat Geo Wild series that he was working on at that point too. And, you know, when I met Sasha, he really was probably the most energetic person we'd ever had step in that office. You would come into work in the morning and he'd be like, "Hey, how are you?" And this is like the first week that you've met him. And I would get in the habit of like, okay, I don't know if I have the energy to like engage with this guy today. Like, I'm just going to sneak over to my desk. But he, you know, just really the most kind person who was wonderful to work with on that wildlife stuff. But I had no idea that our relationship would develop into this story for so many years. And around the time we were launching the Kickstarter campaign, was just starting to test my editing chops a little bit more, doing some assistant editing work on those wildlife shows. And Sasha's story resonated with me as soon as he sat down and spoke to us all about it, and we understood the archive that was there. So I took on editing the 3-minute trailer Kickstarter video for that campaign. And I kind of ran the Kickstarter campaign and figured out how to do that. We'd never done a crowdfunding piece before. But even just editing that 3-minute video, everything about it stuck with me. I started to have a glimpse of this family, of the depth of this story. And I wasn't at that point, like, I did not have the experience to be able to edit the whole film. And so I just got to stay involved more from the producing side for a few years while we continued to get funding. And then by the time we actually had enough for the edit to be invested in and for the time to be taken that needed to be taken, I really kind of was like, I want to do it. You know, I've been thinking about this story for years. And I know that I'm a little bit of a bet because I haven't done this before, but I got to know Sasha really well in that time. And that, I think, was part of what gave him the trust to sort of let me take it on. And like Tom mentioned, I had other people around me. I had my sister, I had Tom. It wasn't like I had Sasha. I wasn't going to be all on my own out there.
Well, I have to say you really knocked it out of the park. What I think I heard you talk about before is that, and I think this is what resonates with people so much, and it's also so frightening, is that this is just a normal family, right? I mean, the way you approached it, and maybe that's the way you saw it after looking at all this footage, is this is the family next door. So can you talk a little bit about that, about how you wanted to make that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there was so much footage, I was just watching footage for over 2 months and making, crazy spreadsheets of how I was going to keep track of everything. And in that time just watching, particularly in the home video, that's what really jumped out to me, is that this by and large, this family just looks like any family any family's home videos. It's family gatherings, it's food, it's laughter, it's you don't read into the subtle things in the background. Those aren't, you don't notice them when you're watching without an awareness of what Sasha and Becca and Henry went through. And it was really important to me. I loved this family. I related to all of these people. And it was very important to me that an audience could relate to them in the same way, which is why there was a big discussion between Sasha and I and at test screenings about the point at which you would reveal that abuse took place. So there were times that Sasha thought at the very beginning of the film, he might tell you, I'm Sasha, I was a victim of child sexual abuse at the hands of 2 uncles and my cousin. And then we would be connecting the dots from there. His intention with that made a ton of sense because he didn't want to string people along. He didn't want to manipulate people, and he didn't want to sensationalize what had happened to him. The reason why we ended up landing with that reveal coming a little bit later is for a couple of reasons, but one of the biggest one is because I wanted you to be introduced to this family before you were putting all of this stuff on top of them. I didn't want them to just be othered as the family that this weird thing happened to. I wanted them to be the family that you related to. And that's because that's the way that these things work, right? It isn't so obvious. People are normal, can look normal, and there can still be these things happening behind the scenes that we actually all have to educate ourselves to look for those really subtle signs. It's not obvious.
Well, and that's something in RogerEbert.com. I remember this was a quote that they had said, it's only a third of the way through Rewind that Neulinger and editor Avela Grenier provide a full picture of the abuse endured by these kids, which makes its sudden clarity all the more violating. And if y'all remember, we had the test screenings and there was a lot of debate about, oh no, you need to say it right up front. Y'all remember that? And it was, we went around and round about it, even ourselves, like, should we tell them first?
Yeah. I mean, it was such a big debate for a long time. I mean, and I'm really happy with where we landed. I feel like there were subtle tweaks too, like after, because Cindy, you were the one that set up our test screening in New York when we had a fine cut. And that was the feedback we got there. We had, Marilyn Ness was in the room, Toby Shippen, and we had Gabe Rhodes was there, and so the feedback was from like really solid, vets. And I think the subtle adjustments that we were able to figure out in the first 16 minutes and how we were presenting my dad, how we were presenting the family, like there were tweaks that we were able to make, which I think got us all to a point where we were comfortable with waiting, where it didn't feel like a string along, and that it was an intentional choice to do it when we did. And that feedback session was huge because, we were like, Tom, Avela, and I, we were in this cloud of Rewind, and we were so in it for so many years. I mean, 7 years, right? And at this point, when we were having the screening, it's like 5.5, And so to be able to have
Montana and come to New York and let's talk about
I remember
I remember that was so great.
Well, and I remember I had like I wasn't part of the meet and greet before the film because we didn't want people to meet me and like see me in person. And I remember going up, I somehow got to some floor I shouldn't have been allowed to be at, like this private, like someone's private bar. And I had like, 3 whiskeys. And then when I came back to watch the film, I kept having to go to the bathroom. It was pretty funny. It was
Moving on. What I think a lot of people are wanting to know, because Howard was such a powerhouse in New York. I mean, he was a major world famous cantor. And yet the Temple Emmanuel really protected him. They raised $2 million to just keep these lawyers, churning at you. So did you ever reach out to the temple? Did they ever reach out to you? Did they ever apologize? Did they ever,
I reached out. I mean, I reached out twice, and we actually filmed my reach out attempts, hoping that would lead to something. The conversation was very much, hey, look, I want to reach out to you about this. We're making this film. The point isn't to create demons or to demonize. It's to have a discussion about what happened in the past and how might we be able to learn from it. That was the outreach, and I did that twice through the proper channels as detailed on their website, but no one ever responded. And even after we premiered Tribeca, we've had all this press, no one's commented or reached out, except I have gotten a few emails, basically victim shaming, hate mail from some of the members of the congregation. So it's unfortunate.
They were hateful toward you about making
me personally, yeah, victim shaming, basically saying that I must have remembered the past wrong, and films should be about facts and not about something a little boy makes up, stuff like that. So it's that's the culture, it seems, and it's unfortunate because I don't think Temple Emmanuel is evil. I think that there's an opportunity for a conversation about, at what point do we take accountability and look at the issues and confront them instead of running from them. And I think that their avoidance is telling.
Yeah, and Cindy, every time we discussed it, including I even reached out at one point under my name, explaining I was the producer on Sasha's film. We had the Kickstarter, we showed him what it was going to be about. Never heard anything back, but and Sasha, I think, had a great way of approaching it. He always said, all I would ask of Temple Emmanuel is for a discussion about mistakes that were made in the past, and that the kind of resources that they can raise towards defending someone like Howard, let's raise those resources toward the fight against child sexual abuse. Like, Sasha didn't want anything for him. He only wanted it for, something that there's never going to be enough resources to help with the effort. So that was always our stance. It was never to be kind of hang them out there to make it seem like this is an evil place. We know there's lots of people at Temple Emmanuel today who have nothing to do with even the time this happened. And it's not our intention to take them down with the actions of some in the past.
Yeah, and I mean, the point wasn't to be adversarial, it was to invite an opportunity to learn from our past and do better for children moving forward. And the fact that they don't want to be a part of that conversation is unfortunate.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, Sasha, as Avela mentioned earlier, you're one of the kindest people that I've ever met, and which is kind of shocking because I don't know what I expected, but I was like, doesn't he have a chip on his shoulder or something? But you have this calm, gracious zen about you, and I flew out to Montana right away and checked all that out to make sure that you guys were for real, because I see a rough cut of this film and I'm just so shocked. I've never signed on to a film as quickly as this one, because I was just so moved, and I thought, this is such an important film. But you are helping so many people with this film, and you actually go and speak at child advocacy centers and for law enforcement and stuff. You've actually gained a huge voice as a speaker. So I'm sure that there are people who have gone through this. Maybe they've gone through physical abuse. Maybe they've gone through addictions. Other traumas. What would you want to say to anyone that has unresolved trauma? Because you do seem, I don't want to say so normal, but you're just, you seem like a normal, gracious, really together person. And I know that didn't just come overnight.
Well, you know what else is normal is, and unfortunately, the reality is that something else that is normal is trauma. It's a human experience. What that trauma is different for everybody. Even there aren't any two child sexual abuse survivors that have the same exact kind of trauma. Every human being on this planet experiences trauma. And through my experience in childhood, in confronting my abusers, and in the experience of making Rewind, I'm a firm believer that if there's anything inside of you that hurts or scares you so much that you can't touch it without being frozen, without being triggered, that's the indication that you actually have to look at it and deal with it and confront it. Because I truly believe that in order to live the life that I'm living now, which I feel is a healthy, balanced, self-empowered experience, I had to be at peace with myself, which means there couldn't be anything I couldn't look at within my past. And so confronting it head on gave me the opportunity to build intimacy with myself, trust in myself, to find my voice, to get to a place where I could honor myself and love myself, and then make decisions in my life that were based on that love and honor. And that's how I've been able to live this life. It's not easy. It wasn't easy. And confronting trauma is
Dr. Lustig too, right?
Dr. Lustig. I mean, that's the thing, is like, I believe that if every human being on this planet had access to a good mental health professional, we'd already be in space. Like, just like, I mean, there's no limit to what we can do as humans. I think that the biggest obstacles that we face are man-made, and they're either within us or it's turbulence within others around us. And whether it's systemic racism, social injustices, like this level of like hatred and making people other, I think comes from unresolved trauma. And it's an indication that we need better mental health services for everybody. I think the world would be a better place.
And fear. I think there's a lot of things are based on fear.
Well, and with fear too, I just want to bounce on that, because like, I think there's stigma around fear. Like, fear is the emotion. It's like the dirty emotion that we don't want to acknowledge, because maybe that makes us weak, or maybe that makes us less than. But I actually think that when we lean into fear, there's heightened awareness, there's opportunity for a closer connection with ourselves. And, to say that we should be fearless, I think that's the wrong message when we're talking about addressing something that's as heavy as child sexual abuse or any kind of trauma. No, we shouldn't be fearless. Actually, we should acknowledge that it scares us and then make an active choice to react in a conscious way to that fear, instead of just pretending it doesn't exist.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to ask a question for everybody. What is your greatest hope for this film? I think we all joined on to make this film with Sasha because we thought it was so important. So what is your greatest hope for this film? And I'll start with Avela on that.
There's a few things, but when I signed on to this project and started being involved, I had never heard of a child advocacy center. This was totally out of my awareness, along with most things relating more specifically to child abuse. And it's not like we spend a huge portion of the film there, but it was really important to me that we ended the film there, that we were leaving people with somewhere to go, something to look into, and with an element of hope. And so one thing that I really hope people would do with this film is look into the child advocacy centers that are in their area, because the first CAC was started in Alabama in the 80s. And the movement has been growing ever since, but there are many rural communities in the US and many places around the world that kids have nowhere to go. It doesn't even matter if they can come forward with their own voice. the system that's built to support them isn't adequate. And so state by state, it varies a ton how much support the public, our taxes, give to these organizations. But I think it's on all of us to, just on a big systemic level, maybe this film will make people think about the fact that they even exist, if you aren't someone who already knows that, and see what they need. Give to them, educate yourself around them, because that all ties into the mental health and breaking the mental health cycles and shackles that will ultimately help lead to this epidemic changing.
Make sure your town has one. You want to make sure there's one in every town.
Yeah.
And Tom, what do you hope for it?
Well, it's whenever you make something, you want people to be able to actually see it. There's so much work went into this by, obviously Sasha, his family really putting themselves out there, Avela and the 2-year edit, and everybody all around like pouring everything into it. And it's been really exciting to see how available it is to the world. We were on Independent Lens, our world broadcast premiere on PBS. At the same time, it was on pbs.org for free for a limited time. And now we're on Amazon Prime, and our Amazon Prime life has been truly organic in the audience growth. People are finding this film, people are telling others about the film. And really what was important to all of us when we got on board is that this film was gonna, in the end, be hopeful. And I think there's a message of hope there that, like Sasha's talking about, everybody can find something in their own lives to put that towards. So I just, and we're gonna be in a lot of international markets soon. I'm just so thrilled that people are finding the film. It's being kind of word of mouth is spreading it, and that everybody does have access to this. It's not behind any sort of cumbersome paywall that would make it so it's only going to be for a small segment of society. So that's been amazing to see, and I think it will have an audience life for many, many, many years as people stumble upon it.
Yeah, of course, we were supposed to be in theaters, and it was the weekend that COVID hit, so they closed the theaters. So we did miss our little theatrical window, but anyway, it's still finding a lot of homes. Sasha, what is your wish for it? You're the one that made it all happen. You started this, you lit this match.
Well, there's two components, and the first one is child advocacy. 1 in 10 children are sexually abused before they turn 18. So that's unacceptable. And we don't live in a world where a Minority Report, where it's not some futuristic world where we can use, some sort of like future telling technology to figure out which home we have to go to protect which child. Like, child sexual abuse continues, especially multi-generational child sexual abuse continues, because kids aren't getting the support that they need when they're kids. If kids are given the support that they need after that trauma and given access to healing and justice while they're kids, the chances of them being able to move forward and live a beautiful, healthy, empowered life is tenfold. And so we have to give them that opportunity. And I hope that Rewind helps broaden the conversation and heighten the awareness around that. And then the second piece is that, I survived multi-generational child sexual abuse, 3 different abusers. You watch the film and you see what I went through, what my sister went through, what my family went through. But today, I am living what I consider to be my best life. I am really happy. I'm in a beautiful marriage. I live exactly where I want to live. I have an amazing dog. I get to use my voice to educate and share, and not just use it, but own it. And I wouldn't be here had I not chosen to confront my trauma head on, and if I hadn't had the support that I had. But if at 31 years old, I'm able to be here despite what I endured, then truly, I believe anyone can move forward beautifully from trauma. And we have to, first we have to believe that that's possible, and then we have to as a society, put in the societal empathy that's required to support people who've been traumatized, and then the resources. Because like I said earlier, trauma isn't, child sexual abuse is one kind of trauma, but every human being experiences trauma. And being more trauma informed in how we talk to people, empathy, making sure that people have access to mental health professionals. Like, I truly believe that anyone can overcome their trauma. And I want that message to ring loud and true.
That is a powerful statement and message that we want everybody to hear. I think we have time for one more question. And I think this is maybe one of the most important things that we could talk about tonight. I know that I have two beautiful daughters, and they have grown up and left the house because they're adults now. But when they were young kids here in Redding, Connecticut, it's such a sweet little town. It's like Mayberry. This was not on my radar. And when I saw this film, I felt very foolish that I had not had it more on my radar. I mean, in a way, I'm lucky that it didn't occur to me so much, but I also feel that there were conversations I should have had with my children, maybe more intently. And I think that we all, either if you have children, grandchildren, neighbors, that people should all have this on their radar to just be able to hear what a kid is saying and watch them. So what I'd like to know is as you have children, Tom has children right now, and I would like to know what it would be that you would say to them after making this film and working on this film and understanding this issue so much better. I'm going to start with Tom because he has two little girls. What would you say to kids now that you know this?
Yeah, we have, Sasha and I have two daughters, ages 7 and 4. The first one was born right around the time when we were starting this film. And it definitely, working on this film so closely, has changed how we'll approach these and already approach these conversations. And one thing I think that we've really been conscientious about, and Sasha talks about this a lot in his speeches, is just making sure our daughters know they always can tell us everything, and that any adult who ever says that they should keep a secret, any adult besides us, is doing something very wrong, and they should tell us immediately if that happens. So it's really the conversation about them knowing that there are no adults who should be able to tell them, and it's so vivid in Sasha's story, the threatened, how much she was threatened if you were to go to an adult. And I think I feel like our daughters are in a place where they really begin to understand that already. So, we don't want to be overbearing. We don't want to make it a paranoid situation, but we just want to establish those kind of boundaries so they know that the second adult starts acting like that, saying you can't ever tell your parents what I'm doing right now, they know immediately something wrong is happening.
And Avela, how about you?
The story that always really hit me in making the film is that of his mom, when she's discussing being behind the door and kind of having this gut instinct that something was up, but then not being able to open it and not being able to follow through on that gut instinct. And I don't have kids, I only have cats. But I think that because of working on this project, I would hope that I would, most importantly, really key into my own gut instinct when it comes to such things. And I do think that's very different than being paranoid and not trusting anyone and expecting something awful to happen to your kids. But I think that it's just about an awareness level. And I now have an education about the signs to look for in a kid, those sudden changes in behavior, a 180-degree personality flip. Your kid doesn't act completely differently for no reason at all. And so I would want to just make sure that I was keying into those and having open dialogue with your kids, really, no matter how young they are. And I've learned just so much listening to Sasha speak about this. And the one other thing that I feel like I would really want to bring to mind is just never really avoiding bringing any shame to the discussion of bodies, period, because we all have to deal with our bodies all the time. It doesn't have to do with anything bad. And so making sure that my kids knew that they could talk about anything going on with their body and not have to feel shameful about it, so that if anything more extreme ever happened, they would know they could come to me.
Sound advice. So Sasha, I'm sure have a lot to say on this issue.
Well, I'm actually like really stoked to hear Tom and Avela's response, because it's like it's what I would do.
We've listened to you.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. No, I'm so excited about it. Yeah, and to elaborate on what Avela was just saying too, it's like if a kid sees that a parent has discomfort around talking about genitalia, then they're inevitably going to have a response to that and think that maybe there's something dirty or wrong with that. So then if they are violated in that area, that's even worse. So a penis is a penis, a vagina is a vagina. We don't need to make nicknames for them. That's what they are. And if we're comfortable in calling them what they are, then the kids will be too. A lot of kids don't even know how to talk about what's happened to them because they don't even have like appropriate descriptors to talk about their body. So we need to empower them and make sure that they understand that it's not wrong or gross or bad to talk about their bodies, because their bodies are not gross or bad. And then, yeah, taking away the power of a threat, making sure, I don't have kids yet, but Lauren and I definitely want to be parents, and we're excited for when that happens. Yeah, you don't want to be paranoid. You don't want to live in a world, you don't want to create an environment where the child is sensing constant fear and paranoia from you. That's not healthy either. I think it's all about empowering the child to know what's right and wrong. And so if they know how to talk about their body parts and they're not ashamed of that, but also if they know what a threat is, helping them understand what a threat is and why threats are inappropriate, and why if they ever experience a moment where they have been threatened, that is the cue for them to come and tell mommy and daddy, because that's inappropriate. No adult should ever threaten you. No kid should ever threaten you. So educating them on a threat, just as important as educating them on what secrets are and why it's inappropriate for any adult to ask you to keep one, aside from us.
But you need to write a book.
What's that?
You need to write a book. This is all really good information that I think so many parents need to hear. We did get one question from the audience.
Sure.
I think, or one that they've sent me. She has asked, did the abusers ever apologize or have a conversation with you personally? So after all this has happened, did you talk to any of them again, or?
I haven't spoken with any of them again. I did reach out to Larry while we were making the film. There was a hope that maybe we would get to talk to him about his experience being abused. And at first he did want to participate in the film, but then his psychiatrist advised him against that. He did not apologize, but maybe we could have had that conversation. I don't know. Stuart didn't have the chance to apologize because he died before the film was completed. And Howard still says that he did nothing wrong. And that was a big part of why we didn't reach out to Howard in the making of this film. We were interested in talking to Larry, Stuart, and Temple Emmanuel, but Howard, even after all of it, didn't really show any remorse. So that wouldn't have been a positive conversation for me to engage in. And what I want to say about apologies is that I don't need apologies from them. If I needed apologies from them, then I would still be a victim, because my happiness or ability to move forward would be dependent on actions that are outside of my control. And that wouldn't be a healthy space for me. So on the flip side of that, I do forgive them. It doesn't mean that I excuse their actions, and it doesn't mean that it wasn't terrible what they did. Forgiveness is about me being able to move on. It's not for them. So I didn't call them and say, hey, guess what? I forgive you. I don't say it in the film. But not holding that hate and resentment for what they did, but instead now finally at this point in my healing journey where I can say, all right, Stuart was once a little child and he was sexually abused and he didn't get any help. I can understand that maybe he grew up into the person that he did because of that. I can have empathy, and there I can forgive. Same with Larry. With Howard, I feel sorry for the guy. I mean, he is lived in a state of pain, I'm assuming, his entire life, and to live in so many lies and so much pain, that sounds miserable. You know, at the end of the day, the choice to move forward after trauma has to be an internal one and can't be dependent on the people that may have hurt you. Otherwise, you continue to be their victim.
Those are very, very wise words, Sasha. And this has been a pleasure this evening. I think we are out of time, but I hope that everyone enjoyed it. And thank you so much for all joining me here tonight and for working with me for these 3 years. It's been one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Cindy,
amazing.
When you came on board onto this film, when you believed in us and when you joined the team, that's when we went from a story we believed in to a story we could share with the world. And you helped it happen. You helped bring it to where it is today. And we love you. So it's, it's mutual admiration.
Make me cry. Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And we'll be talking soon.